waking up in the greatest city on earth. You are surrounded by marble temples, golden statues, and the roar of thousands of people. The city is Rome, and it is magnificent. But here's what they never told you. Beneath those polished columns and triumphal arches, life for most people in ancient Rome was a nightmare. Poverty, violence, filth, disease, psychological terror, and a system of power so cruel it would make modern minds recoil. This is not the Rome of emperors and epics. This is the Rome that history quietly buried. For centuries, we have romanticized Rome. We've built our governments on its laws, our cities on its architecture, our language on its tongue. Rome represents civilization itself, order born from chaos, culture carved from conquest. But civilization has a shadow. Rome was home to over 1 million people at its peak. 1 million people crammed into a city without running sewage, without hospitals as we know them, without anything resembling basic safety. And for the vast majority, the poor, the enslaved, the forgotten, Rome was less of a golden age and more of a daily struggle to survive. Tonight, we peel back the marble. We look not at the emperors, but at the people they ruled. Not at the monuments, but at the streets between them. This is the dark side of life in ancient Rome. And it is far more disturbing than you might expect. Let's begin where most Romans actually lived, not in sprawling villas, not in marbled halls. Most Romans lived in massive, multi-story apartment buildings called Insulae, and they were, to put it simply, death traps. These structures could rise 6, 7, even 8 stories high. They were built fast and built cheap. Wood, mud brick, and fragile mortar stacked dangerously into the sky. The Roman engineer Vitruvius himself wrote that the insulae of Rome were alarmingly unstable. Collapses were so common that the Emperor Augustus tried to cap building heights at 70 feet, though historians believe this law was frequently ignored, and when they didn't collapse, they burned. Tenants on upper floors had no access to the city's aqueduct water. That was a luxury for the ground level and the wealthy below. So they cooked with open flames in cramped wooden spaces, with no firefighting infrastructure beyond bucket chains and luck. Fire tore through Roman apartment blocks with horrifying regularity. The Great Fire of Rome in 64 AD, famously blamed on Nero, destroyed 10 of the city's 14 districts. But smaller fires, forgotten by history, killed thousands every year. On the upper floors, you paid less rent because you were always one spark away from the street, or worse, from falling into ash. Now step outside. The streets of Rome were not the clean, organized thoroughfares you might picture. They were dark, narrow, and dangerous, particularly at night. There were no streetlights in ancient Rome. Wealthy citizens moved through the city after dark, carried in litters by enslaved people surrounded by torchbearers. Everyone else walked in near total darkness, hoping not to become a victim, and the violence was real. Roman poet Juvenal wrote vividly about the dangers of walking Rome's streets at night. Muggers waited in the shadows. Drunken brawls erupted regularly. And from above, because Roman law did not prohibit it, residents of the Upper Insulae would empty their chamber pots directly into the street below. Walking too close to a wall after dark could drench you in something far worse than rainwater. The law required residents to call a warning before throwing waste into the street. In practice, this was rarely observed. The smell of ancient Rome, historians believe, would be nearly unbearable to modern nostrils. No sewage system reached the poor quarters. The Cloaca Maxima, Rome's famous main sewer, served the lower, wealthier areas of the city. For everyone else, waste piled in the streets, in shared cesspits, and in the alleys between buildings. Disease was constant. Dysentery, typhoid, malaria from the surrounding marshlands. Life expectancy for the average Roman citizen hovered somewhere between 25 and 35 years, though scholars debate this, noting that if you survived childhood, you might live considerably longer. But childhood itself was brutally dangerous. This is perhaps one of the most disturbing realities of ancient Rome, and one of the least discussed. In ancient Roman law, a newborn child had no legal rights until the father chose to accept it. This was called the patria potestas, the power of the father. When a child was born, it was placed on the floor before the father. If he lifted it, the child lived and became part of the family. If he turned away, the child was left outside. This practice was called exposure, and it was legal, widely practiced, and largely accepted by Roman society. Infants, often daughters or children born with physical differences, or simply children that poor families could not afford to feed, were left at specific places around the city. The column of Lactaria in the Forum Holitorium was one such site, reportedly named because wet nurses would gather there to feed abandoned infants. Some of these children were rescued and raised as enslaved workers. Some were taken in by families who could not have children of their own, and many simply did not survive. Roman scholars of the time debated the ethics of this practice. Some opposed it. Others accepted it as a practical necessity. The Stoic philosopher Musonius Rufus argued against it in the 1st century AD, which tells us that by that point, many Romans accepted it without question. The scale of child abandonment in ancient Rome remains unknown, but archaeological evidence, including the discovery of infant skeletons in unusual locations around Roman sites in Britain, Italy, and North Africa, suggests it was not rare. These were children who existed briefly in the shadow of one of history's greatest empires, and then disappeared. We need to talk about slavery, not as a footnote, not as background detail, because slavery was not a peripheral feature of ancient Rome, it was the engine. At the height of the Roman Empire, historians estimate that enslaved people made up somewhere between 15% and 40% of the total population of Italy. In the city of Rome itself, the number may have been even higher. This means that at any given moment, hundreds of thousands of human beings were legally classified as property, as things, not people. Roman law was explicit on this point. An enslaved person had no legal identity. They could not own property. They could not marry. They could not testify in court, except under torture, because Roman law held that enslaved testimony was only reliable if given under physical duress. Conditions varied enormously. Some enslaved people held positions of significant responsibility, managing estates, tutoring children, practicing medicine. But for the majority, the reality was brutal. Agricultural slaves worked the great Roman farms, the latifundia, in conditions that ancient sources describe as extraordinarily harsh. They worked in chain gangs, they slept in cells, they had no recourse, no rights, and no hope of freedom, except through the rare gift of manumission, release granted by their owner. And then there were the mines, the Roman mining operations, in Spain, in Britain, in North Africa, were regarded even by ancient Romans as death sentences. The Greek historian Diodorus Siculus described enslaved miners in Spain working without rest, without adequate food, dying young from exhaustion and disease. The mines produced the silver and gold that funded the empire. They ran on human suffering. Spartacus and his rebellion of 73 BC, a moment remembered by history as dramatic, was not simply a military uprising. It was an act of desperation by people who had decided that death in open revolt was preferable to the life being offered to them. At its peak, his force numbered somewhere around 70,000 people. When it was crushed, 6,000 crucified bodies lined the Appian Way from Rome to Capua, left there for months as a message. The message was, do not resist. And yet, through all of this, the filth, the danger, the exploitation, Rome kept its citizens distracted, bread and circuses. That's the phrase the poet Juvenal used to describe Roman politics. Keep the people fed enough, keep them entertained enough, and they won't ask the harder questions. The Colosseum, completed around 80 AD under Emperor Titus, could hold an estimated 50,000 to 80,000 spectators. On its opening days, historical sources claim that 9,000 animals were killed in a single celebration. Gladiatorial combat, animal hunts, public executions, all performed for the entertainment of a crowd that cheered, jeered, and voted on whether dying men should be allowed to live. We should be clear here. Gladiators were not always the willing. Warriors of legend, many were enslaved people, prisoners of war, or condemned criminals. Some did choose the life, attracted by the small chance at fame and freedom. But the arena was built on compulsion, not choice. What is perhaps most disturbing is how normalized it all was. Roman children attended the games. Roman families brought food and watched executions between bouts. Roman philosophers occasionally questioned the morality of the spectacle. The Stoic philosopher Seneca wrote that he left the arena feeling more cruel and less human than when he arrived. But the games continued for centuries. Violence was not a dark corner of Roman culture, it was the centerpiece. Rome fell, officially, in 476 AD, when the last Western emperor was deposed. But Rome had been eroding long before that. Some historians argue it rotted from within. Inequality so extreme it became unsustainable, an enslaved population that outnumbered the free, a gap between the powerful and the powerless so vast it could never truly be bridged. What survives of Rome is stone and text, the monuments, the laws, the literature of the elite. What doesn't survive, mostly, are the voices of the people who built all of it, the enslaved laborer who cut the stone, the child left at the column, the woman in the upper floor of the Insula, cooking over a flame, listening to the creak of walls that might not hold. We remember Rome as civilization, and it was. But civilization throughout history has always been built on something, and that something is usually the suffering of those at the bottom. That is not ancient history. That is a pattern. And the fact that Rome still dazzles us, still inspires, our governments, our art, our self-image as a modern world should perhaps give us pause. What are we choosing not to look at? What are we romanticizing today that future generations will look back on with horror? Rome is a mirror, and if you look long enough, what stares back might surprise you. If you want more stories from humanity's forgotten past, the dark histories, the lost voices, the uncomfortable truths, subscribe to Mythic Origins. We go where most history channels don't.